Israeli strikes continue to pound Gaza, with hospitals full of children on the front line. The main hospital serving Gaza City is no longer functioning after 3 days without power. That's according to the World Health Organization, who also told BBC that Al-Shifa Hospital has lost the ability to carry out basic functions and has effectively turned into a morgue. The horrors emerging from Gaza are stoking outrage worldwide, drawing hundreds of thousands of protesters who have been marching in solidarity with the Palestinians right up through this weekend. The call for a ceasefire is accelerating, from London to Buenos Aires to Jakarta to right outside President Biden's Delaware home, a sign of the deep fracture over Gaza here in the U.S. Black Christian faith leaders are sounding the alarm as well, meeting with White House officials and members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Last week, prominent Black clergy sent President Biden a very simple and direct message, a full-page ad in the New York Times that calls for a ceasefire and immediate de-escalation, including the return of all hostages held by Hamas. Joining me now are two of the faith leaders calling for a ceasefire: the Reverend Mark Thompson, host of the Make It Plain podcast, and the Reverend Leah Daughtry, presiding prelate of the House of the Lord Churches and co-founder of Black Church PAC. Thank you both for being here. Reverend Daughtry, I do want to start with you. This letter's purpose, please explain it, and please explain if you've had any response from the Biden administration.
First, thank you, Joy, for having us this evening to talk about this critically important issue. We decided to do this letter because as people of faith, as people of conscience, and given the call on who we purport to serve, that is Creator God, we could not stand by and watch the horror that is taking place in Gaza and in Israel as innocent lives, whether it is through Hamas and the killing and the taking of the hostages, or whether it is the tens of thousands now, more than 10,000 women, children, families, whole families that are being decimated by what we felt was a disproportionate response by the nation of Israel. And so we wanted to be very clear and on the record as Christian faith leaders, we did not want anyone to have in doubt what our theology was saying about this matter, which is that the nations are called to conscience about how we are treating these people, how we are seeing their lives, and how we value their lives. Because at the end of the day, if we decide that Palestinian lives are expendable, it says something about us and our moral authority and our moral center that we could diminish and demean God's creation. And that's why we wanted to be very public about this statement. We met with the Congressional Black Caucus and also with the White House to share with them our feelings and our thoughts before we published the letter. They were well aware. We gave them the heads up that this was coming. And we think that we will continue, we know that we will continue to press this issue, press this case until we see the ceasefire that we think is necessary on both sides.
And Reverend Mark, my friend, there's a sort of a disconnect, I think, for a lot of people when they see Black faith leaders coming forward with a letter like this. Historically, the Black church has been very aligned with Israel, very pro-Israel. But there is a history of Black folk who have sided with the Palestinian cause going back to the 1960s. Dr. King has spoken about what he felt Israel needed to do. He planned, he canceled a march of Black clergy in Israel right before the 1967, or just after the 1967 war broke out. Can you talk about some of the signatories here and the connections between African-American clergy and this issue?
Well, thank you, Joy. God bless you as well. Pastor Michael McBride called us together to sign this very important letter. And we, as Black clergy, not only have to ask ourselves, what would Jesus do, but what would the Jesus in our modern times do? What would MLK do? And he did speak out after the 6 Days War. Leah's father was with us when we marched on the U.S. mission to the UN last week, where Dr. King went inside in 1965 and in 1967 calling for a ceasefire in Vietnam. Now, one of the most important signatories on this letter of over 900 African-American clergy is the Reverend James Lawson, who stood with Dr. King, who first went to India, was Dr. King's true comrade and ultimately his apostle in nonviolence. He led the Nashville sit-in movement and invited Dr. King to Memphis to the sanitation workers movement. And he spoke out. All these types of violence are wrong. Some may ask, well, what about Hamas? What Hamas did was equally despicable, but What Hamas did, we didn't know about. It was a surprise. So if people knew what Hamas was trying to do, I'm sure all of us would have also decried and signed a letter in advance. But we knew it was announced what Israel was going to do when it came to Gaza. The majority of Gaza's population are young people. These are young people who are non-combatants. This violates all types of international laws and laws of war. And so that's why we are standing together. We cannot bear to see this go on. There has to be a better way. And as far as the Biden administration is concerned, this takes me back, quite frankly, to 1980, when another conflict, not of a president's duty, actually caused him to lose office. So we have to stand up as we hear more people in the Black faith community, particularly more young people of color in particular, saying they're not going to vote because of the U.S. policy or lack thereof when it comes to the region. Both sides, all sides are human beings. They all should be saved. There must be a better answer, and there must be redemption, and there must be peace.
I just want to read you what Dr. King said, and he is talking about King canceling this pilgrimage in 1967 after Israel captured the West Bank. During a phone call about the visit with his advisors, he said, "I just think that if I go, the Arab world, and of course Africa and Asia for that matter, would interpret this as endorsing everything that Israel has done, and I do have questions of doubt." I wonder if, Reverend Daughtry, there was a thought about broadening who was on this list. This is Black clergy. There are a lot of Jewish Americans who are also marching in favor of this cause. Was there a consideration at a certain point? There's going to be a big pro-Israel march, I should note, tomorrow in D.C. But was there a thought of expanding this list of people to include people who are not Black clergy?
You know, Joy, we thought about that, and we could have easily placed 5 or 6 New York Times ads with the people who were interested. We really thought that it was important for us as Black Christian faith leaders. We're not Jewish, we're not Muslim, but also because of the long history that we have had with the Jewish community and their solidarity with us in the civil rights movement. And of course, the Palestinians as well. It was important for us to say as a community, as faith leaders from across the nation, that what our opinion is, and that we were standing on the side of conscience and the side of peace.
Reverend Mark Thompson and Reverend Leah Daughtry, thank you both very much.